climbing from one place to another and being even getting into sales and then being president, all the way from a forklift operator all the way there. Like, what are some of the lessons you learned and what are some of the advantages of having boots on the ground?
More often than not, I would say I learned from my first mistake and tried not to repeat them. But I think anybody is going to have to go through that learning process, whether they're just starting to boots on the ground or they're coming out of school and getting into something and going directly into some sort of management role.
Our customers beating down on storage charge or receiving charge, etc., and everyone is kind of trying to compete in that race to bottom basically without understanding their margins, etc.
It's got to be a partnership, and so when there are times that things are not working for our clients, if we can give them a break somehow, or we can figure out efficiencies, or we have an operations background that we can plug in and say, yeah, we can take some time out of the process here, or we can be a little bit more efficient with the space here. And those are things we look at.
Welcome everyone to episode 7 of Execution at Scale. I'm your host, Vikrant Neb, founder of Leanify and Curator, and also author of Execution Under Pressure. And this series exists because I believe best conversation in the industry happens always in the hallway over coffee or a beer, and not really on the stage. So with this podcast, trying to change that, free flowing, and right from the heart, basically. And today is a little bit different because every episode so far we have done, it talks about what breaks, what goes wrong, how to fix it, etc. But this one is unique because I have Jeremy Van Puffelen with me, president of Prism Logistics. Prism Logistics was started by Jerry Van Puffelen, and who's dad of Jeremy. However, instead of traditionally taking over the business or getting handed off, Jeremy was the one who had to go through and buy it, and he had a full commitment to do it, which we will talk about, and how also the operation scaled over 25 years as Jeremy worked with Prism. And right now, today, there is about 2.5 million square feet across Northern California, serving most demanding CPG and food and beverage brands in the country. Jeremy is also co-chair at IWLA. That's where I met Jeremy a couple months back. And thanks to IWLA that we met. So, yeah, I would kind of hand it off to you, Jeremy, in case I missed anything, I said anything incorrectly, or you would like to add on anything.
No, I've nothing really to correct you on. Additions, I certainly haven't done any of this on my own. I have a brother, Zach Van Puffelen. He's also in the business with me, a partner who also had the opportunity to buy in when my dad's original partner was retiring. That was our opportunity to get in if we wanted to get in. We both took that opportunity at the same time, and Zach prefers not to be on camera. I think he'd prefer to be in operations and working through our IT stuff. So it's a good yin yang. We offset each other really well, but the only way we've been able to grow is through him. And then we had a partner of our own that also bought in when my dad's original partner retired in 2014. His name was Mike Mayo. He was our VP of operations for 25 years as well as a partner, and then he retired at the end of 2025, and my brother Zach and I acquired his shares at that point in time. So now it's down to my father and my brother and I.
If you don't mind, before we go into specifics of operations, etc., I want to hear your story once again. I mean, I've heard it, but I want our listeners to kind of hear your journey from ground up, how you started, how you got involved in Prism, and where it all went from there.
So my dad founded the company in 1993 with his partner, Paul Van Rovert. They got their first account. So they started the company in June of 93. They got their first account in September of 93. So when they left the company they were working with before, they set up a small office in my dad's house. I think at that point in time, I was going into my junior year of high school. So I wasn't ready to jump into the workforce quite yet, but they started grinding out of my dad's house. And then I joined them in 96. I graduated high school in 95. I was going to a local community college, and they were getting really busy, needed some help, and it was probably the best thing for me in the long run. I was thinking about a different path, but Hopped on a forklift and was their janitor, and it was a flower warehouse, so it was 40,000 square feet of flowers, just nasty everywhere. But spent quite a bit of time just sweeping up flour and restacking broken bags, different things. Yeah, it was fun. But so yeah, it started in '96, and just we continued to grow.
Yeah, no, because I totally agree. And it is very interesting because when you start from ground up, you kind of get to know the problems at the ground level from all the way to top. And that I think makes us a very good leader because I remember my first engagement, like although I was working as a consultant, but still I was working on the floor, picking up boxes, trying to see like how people actually work because then we get to know what they go through every day, right? So come here, like fast forwarding. So tell about the journey. Like you were in different roles. Like if you can recall, I know it was 30 years back, but still, like how your experience was as a young kid, like in high school, working like with your dad or like in the company in general, and then progressing from one role to another. Like what was going on in your mind?
There were like probably multiple conversations going on in my head and then within my family. I probably one with my wife that may have been a little different than the one with my dad about how quickly I wanted to progress and where I wanted to go. Again, after a few years where I really started getting serious about it, I'd say, I probably spent 3 years just kind of treating it as a job, not thinking that I was going to be there for a long time. But as I started getting into it more and getting more serious about wanted to get married and have kids and start thinking about it more as a long-term career. And there were just steps that I took. There were things that I had to work on to take the next steps, things that my dad and other people couldn't do for me, whether that's just about my own seriousness or my focus around the business. There were things, when I was 19, 20 years old, I wasn't as focused as I may be today. So, it was I guess I'd say that I won't really count that 96 to 98 time frame. I think I was just there to drive a forklift and do the things and learn. But it did teach me a lot about timing, and it did teach me a lot about what everyone on the team is going through.
So did your team, like you were working with like forklift drivers, etc. Like, so did your team know that like your dad is the owner of the company, or was it like kept confidential? Because I'm curious, like how it works. Like, were they as friendly with you like as they were with everyone, or they would think that, oh, if I share something with Jeremy, like that might come off to the management in a wrong way or something? Like what how was your experience with that?
I was so early on. So in the very beginning, no, I think there were only two or three of us in the warehouse, right? And then my dad and his partner, and then my mom in the office trying to grow the business. So there weren't a lot of people that I had to work through as far as impressing them or changing the narrative or anything around those things. It was a husband, his wife, and then some of their family, and it was that was easier than as I got a little bit more developed in the business. That initially they just wanted to pour into me. They knew exactly who I was. They knew I was Jerry's son. They it didn't stop. Juan was his name, and it didn't stop Juan from driving down on me pretty hard. He was another good mentor, another good teacher along the way. And I think my dad was pretty honest with him and said, "Hey, man, if he's not doing well, then you need to get on him," and gave him that ability to do so and the authority to do so. So he did a lot of coaching for me. He taught me a lot, and one of the hardest, best workers I've ever met in my life. And I feel like he definitely inspired me to work harder a lot of the time that I was there. So he did a lot for me. I appreciate him still to this day, but there wasn't anything at that point in time, I'd say, that I had to work with.
There's also second scenario, especially in today's time, right? Because supply chain, everything has evolved a lot over the last few years, in last decade or so. So lot many times people are coming right out of college and becoming like maybe a warehouse manager or procurement manager and so on, like who have not had like boots on the ground. So in both these scenarios, like what would you say like some of the major lessons which you learned in that journey, like having boots on the ground, climbing from one place to another, and being even getting into sales and then being president, all the way like from a forklift operator all the way there. Like What are some of the lessons you learned, and what are some of the advantages of having boots on the ground?
I would never want to discount somebody who went through school and took a different path than what I took. I think a lot of it has to do with timing, right? One might take a little bit longer than the other. There's a reason people get off to school and get the degrees and have everything so that they can come in. I think there's advantages, obviously, to both. I think a lot of the time, and this is not just our company or our industry, I think a lot of the time things are different on paper than they are when you're actually on the floor going through the process. So I've had a lot of benefit from learning through experience, and some of those experiences were great. Some of them were hard. I didn't always do everything right, so more often than not, I would say I learned from my first mistake and tried not to repeat them. But I think anybody is going to have to go through that learning process, whether they're just starting and it's boots on the ground, or they're coming out of school and getting into something and going directly into some sort of management role. I think you can be successful clearly on either path. Um, for me, it was helpful for where I'm at today, just understanding everything about our company. Um, we're not a big corporate machine, so it's different. If I needed to go do something in the warehouse, I could go do it. Other people don't structure it that way, and not that that's bad. It's just a different structure.
Yeah, I mean, like you made a very good point, and like in my career in operations in different types of companies, not just warehousing. I mean, that has been a common problem where like the sales team is saying, "Oh yeah, like they're promising the moon," when there is not much there, and all the pressure then comes on the operations, and then you mess up, then like it goes into a cycle, right? And even delivery timings, right? Like if you're doing manufacturing and being able to meet the like delivery timelines, so be able to commit what is at least as much close to reality as possible is very important. And I totally agree. And I'm curious, like how it shapes up all the experiences of being in the roles, or like being close to, let's say, like the actual operators. How does it shape up leadership differently?
There's multiple paths to end up in the same spot, right? And whether that's going through school or whether it's the boots on the ground and just kind of learning through the process, I think you can be successful in both. I think for me, again, it helped me just being on the floor, understanding what the team's doing, how long things take. So I really sell from an operations background. And I think when you're selling from an operations background, it just helps, again, with timing, pricing, understanding what the best fit is for your team internally, but also what is realistic for a customer and understanding their needs. And if those two things can come together, then you're really talking about service more than anything, hopefully, versus just a price-based conversation.
Few of the conversations, even at IWLA or other events, like when we talk to newer 3PLs, like biggest thing is, oh, like our customer is beating down on storage charge or receiving charge, etc., etc., and everyone is kind of trying to compete in that race to bottom, basically, without understanding their margins, etc., and not having that problem solving mindset, I guess, because the customer is then just saying that, oh, like do this or that. What are your thoughts on this scenario?
Yeah, I'll probably leave that one alone for the most part. We work on building good relationships and being fair with our clients. So understanding the business well helps us get there. We know what it takes on our side to get to where we need to be financially successful, and we know a fair amount about um, the customer side as well and what they need to be successful. So we treat it as a relationship. We want to make sure that they're happy and they're doing well. And we are also happy that we're doing well. It really does have to be, it's got to be a partnership. And so when there are times that things are not working for our clients, if we can give them a break somehow, or we can figure out efficiencies, or we have an operations background that we can plug in and say, yeah, we can take some time out of the process here, or we can be a little bit more efficient with the space here, then those are things we look at.
That's wonderful. I guess what I'm hearing is that given the operations background, you guys are naturally solving for problems, creating more efficiencies, which is at the end helping your customers and yourself as well. So,
Well, that's the goal, isn't it? We're
yeah.
here we're here as an extension of our clients. So if they would be doing this in our locations for themselves, they're going to continue pushing forward to drive efficiencies, remove costs in the process. So we should be doing the same thing.
Doubling in 5 years is not a easy task, right? And you have done it almost twice. So, and again, planning to do it. So, what were some of the, I guess, difficult decisions you had to take in that process? Like when every time you were going from X to 2X, and what were some of the differences in terms of how you ran the company or any processes you had to change, which is totally different?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, going back to our VP of operations, Mike Mayo, I think the biggest thing was really building the culture with the team that had been with us for so long to make sure that that culture was moving forward with everyone we were growing with and new people coming in. And I think that's the hardest thing to do in probably any company. The larger you get or the more regions that you enter, it's hard to maintain your culture. I think you only retain clients for long times if you are treating them well, doing a really good job, and you are price competitive, right? So build those relationships, make sure it's fair for everybody, and then it's the hurdles become easier to jump. So there wasn't any one major thing where we said, all right, to 2X, now we got to do this. We've always invested in our WMS systems, our technology, our people. So I think it was just doing more and being willing to take on a little bit more risk than we maybe would have in the past. The dollars start changing on what leases look like in bigger buildings, things of that nature. So maybe taking on more risk, but it was really still just doing what we do.
If someone who's watching us, and they're 100,000 square feet warehouse started maybe 3-4 years back, what would be your advice to them in terms of, I guess, the most common mistakes you have seen others make, or maybe general advice to a typical SME 3PL?
I'm going to go back to the partnerships. Listen to your customers. If they're telling you this is what they need and where they need to be, then do everything you can to get to where they need to be and help them. I think you push it as far as you can, as lean as you can, without sacrificing service and your ability to manage the financials of the company. But keep it as lean as long as you can. You start adding a bunch of bodies, then it's tough to keep your pricing where it needs to be to make sure it's always making sense for the customers. So we can run lean and we can be efficient with both space and labor. That's what allows us to try and keep the cost where it needs to be for our clients. So
as I talk to a lot of different people, or even at some of the IW events, as people are speaking, there's a mixed set of opinion. One opinion is that, okay, yeah, we should have a little bit diversification. We have multiple revenue streams, like you mentioned. And personally, I agree with that. I also think of a business like that. But then there are some people who say that, oh, you should be very specific, just do pallet in, pallet out, or do cross dock, or do food, or do e-commerce, just specialize into a very specific niche. So what are your thought processes behind these two different things, I guess, or they're kind of overlapping, but yeah.
For us, I think, again, it depends on your path for growth, I think, and what you want to do. I think for us to continue to grow the way that we would like to, and to be able to do that double and five kind of process that we're hoping to continue, I think for us, we need to diversify a little bit more, right? And we've been doing that over the last couple of years and things that we're doing. So, but I think you can also do really well by having a very specific niche and just staying in your lane, so to speak. Like if this is where you want to be and that's all you want to do, but you do that the best, then you can be very successful there. It's really everyone's on their own journey with their companies and their business and what they want that to look like. You can be successful with whatever lane you want to be in as long as you're really good at it. So, like In-N-Out, right? In-N-Out, they don't have a ton of different options as far as their burgers and stuff go. But I love In-N-Out. I'm a huge fan. Their burgers are great. They're the same every time. But they have a very specific lane. They're not trying to be everything to everybody, right? I don't think they're offering chicken nuggets and chicken sandwiches and all this other stuff. It's very specific, right? And they're really good at it and they kill it. So I don't know. I think across any industry, if you're really good at the thing you are doing, I think you can be successful.
If someone tells me, okay, we are doing like pallet in and out, or like doing the B2B side of traditional 3PL and wanting to do fulfillment, my first comment to them is that yes, you should and you can, but these are kind of like two very different processes and businesses. And same thing, like, even with packaging, if you think about, like, if you're doing contract packaging, like as I added on service, and this is my opinion, and I want kind of your thought process on this, that people like who don't treat them as different process and different business per se, even within the same building, that's where, like, the problem starts coming in, like, because I guess even pricing for a pallet in pallet out operation versus for fulfillment versus for contract packaging is very different.
It is very different. Yeah, the pricing models do not necessarily overlap, and there's volume play that doesn't overlap, and there is space requirements that don't overlap. They're very different things. The investment in um, equipment, you have it for both, but if you're trying to have a very productive e-commerce line, um, then you probably need some sort of automation, right? If you're pumping out thousands of orders a day, um, you can do that in a traditional model where you have people sitting there kind of picking it and sticking it to pallets. But as you run it through a labeling process, is that the most efficient? There's different investments, I think, from an equipment standpoint, and software is different, I think, than a traditional 3PL software where it's really location-based systems versus a throughput-based system where you're just trying to get information and track the information versus where's the pallet, what's the lot number. They're very different.
If anyone asks me, like, I say the same thing, that if you're thinking about running it on the same process and same system, then yes, like, you should probably stick in your lane. If you really want to do it, you have to understand the differences and nuances into it. And even in transportation, for example, they can be last mile, LTL, FTL. Are you asset based? Are you doing brokerage? Or you can go all the way into even container freight, so
Yeah.
it's endless. So one of the things, like, I know that Jerry and you, both of you have been like really involved in IWLA, and I became part of IWLA early this year, and I've been to only two events, but I really see the importance and value of the different sessions, right? Like, and these are the exact discussions we are having at like, an event like IWLA, and there are ones like around pricing. There is one coming up in fulfillment, so on. So, can you share a little bit, maybe kind of like from the start, like, because you have seen Jerry being present in the community, you are very much involved in the community. What role does it play, one, in your own growth as well, and then also how it can benefit, like, others? You know what I mean?
I grew up going to the IWA conventions, whether that was in high school or junior high, because my dad attended the IWA conventions and everything well before he started Prism. So he ran companies for other people for a long time, and he was part of the IWA, which was not the IWA back then. I think it was the AWA, America Warehousemen's Association.
Okay.
So it probably other names as well, but he's been going for a long time. I want to say probably since like 1975, 73.
Wow.
So it's been quite a while that he's been attending, and he one of the first things he did when he started Prism in '93 was join the IWA. And he thought that from an education standpoint, and I agree with him, from an education standpoint and a networking standpoint and giving back, those were good building blocks and foundational things to build a successful company. My own journey, I've learned a lot. I learned my essentials course. I had a great time. I met a lot of people. I learned a lot about setting up a warehouse and pricing. And you've got guys like Bob Moran who've been teaching people pricing for so long, and has had an impact on so many people on how they approach the rates cost analysis. So you're learning how other people do things. You're learning how other people operate. You're learning about how other people are implementing technology. It is a massive fountain of educational information when it comes to anything from setting up a warehouse, operating it, run it through HR, legal advice. I mean, the legal advice that we get, and the terms and conditions and everything that the IWLA provides, it's unmatched.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for concluding that. And I totally agree with it. And thank you so much for your time today. I won't keep you waiting. I know we were supposed to keep it an hour, but we'll probably do a follow-up session, like, maybe in few months and see where things are.